The morning sun peeked through the blinds of Jack Miller's diner. Jack wiped down the counter with a damp cloth, his movements efficient despite his 65 years. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air as locals filed in for breakfast. Jack's knees ached as he moved. Old war wounds never truly healed, not the physical ones and certainly not the mental ones. 30 years had passed since the Vrexian War, since humanity proved itself to the galaxy through blood and sacrifice. Jack had been there on the front lines, a Marine who saw the worst of what alien enemies could do. Now he just wanted peace and quiet in his little Montana town. "Morning, Jack." "The usual, please," said Bill Parker, sliding onto a stool at the counter. Bill was one of the few in town who hadn't served. He looked at Jack with the same respect most civilians showed veterans. "Coming right up," Jack replied, pouring coffee into a mug with the Marine Corps' emblem. His large hands, still strong despite the wrinkles and age spots, moved with precision. The bell above the door jingled. Jack looked up to see something that still felt strange even after all these years. Aliens entering his diner. 2 Loraxians, furry beings with 4 arms and gentle demeanors, took a booth in the corner. They were tourists, based on their excited chittering and the guidebooks they carried. Unlike some, Jack didn't mind alien visitors. He'd killed enough during the war. In peacetime, he was content to serve them pancakes and listen to their strange languages. The door chimed again. This time, Jack's body tensed before his mind could even process why. 3 tall, insect-like creatures ducked to enter the diner. Zathri. Jack had never fought their kind during the war, but he'd seen enough combat to recognize predators when he saw them. The diner went quiet. The Zathri stood nearly 7 feet tall with chitinous exoskeletons and compound eyes that reflected the light in unsettling patterns. Their limbs ended in claws that clicked against the floor tiles. "We seek sustenance," the lead Zathri announced, in the stilted universal common language all aliens used with humans. Jack nodded. "Take any open table. I'll be with you in a minute." The aliens sat, their posture stiff and alert. Jack noticed how their eyes tracked everyone in the diner, how their claws remained close to objects at their waists that were almost certainly weapons, not tourists, not merchants. Something else. Jack served the Zathri with professional courtesy. They ordered raw meat and a fermented drink that Jack kept in stock for non-human customers. They ate quickly, speaking in their clicking language when Jack wasn't nearby. As they prepared to leave, the lead Zathri approached the counter. "This settlement, it has authority figures?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "We have a mayor and a sheriff, if that's what you're asking. Your law enforcers, they carry primitive projectile weapons, yes? Ballistic guns?" The alien's mandibles twitched, in what Jack recognized as amusement. "They do the job," Jack replied evenly. "Something I can help you with?" "No, elder human. We simply gather information. Your species decommissions its warriors at your age, correct?" "Fascinating practice." Jack just nodded, keeping his face neutral as the aliens left. But inside, alarm bells were ringing. He'd heard that tone before, the contempt of someone who thought they had found easy prey. Later that afternoon, Susan Hayes entered the diner, her gray hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. At 60, she still had the ramrod posture from her 20 years as an Army Ranger. "Jack," she said quietly, sliding onto a stool. "Have you seen our visitors?" Jack poured her coffee without asking. "Had 3 of them in here this morning, asking questions about law enforcement." Susan sipped her coffee. "They were at my hardware store too, asking about security systems, looking at tools. Got the feeling they weren't planning home improvements." "Zathri don't usually come this far into human territory," Jack said. "I checked the nets after they left. They're mercenaries mostly, hired muscle." "For who?" The bell rang again and Frank Delgado hobbled in using his cane. At 70, the former demolitions expert moved slowly due to his artificial hip, but his eyes were sharp as ever behind thick glasses. "You two talking about the bugs?" Frank asked, his voice lowered as he joined them at the counter. "Saw 6 more land at the old Miller field, setting up some kind of base." Jack frowned. "They ask, any questions in town?" Plenty. About who owns what business, who's in charge, how many people have military background. Frank tapped his cane against the floor. Got real interested when someone mentioned most folks around here are retired military. Susan's eyes narrowed. They're casing the place. Looks that way, Jack agreed. Question is why? We're just a small town. Nothing valuable here. The door opened again, and Diane Powell entered. The former naval intelligence officer looked worried, her tablet clutched tightly in her hand. I just intercepted some communications, she said without preamble. She'd never lost her habit of getting straight to the point. They're with something called the Graknar Syndicate. It's a criminal organization that's been expanding into frontier settlements. What do they want? Frank asked. The usual. Protection, money, control of shipping. Eventually, they take over completely. Diane's fingers danced across her tablet. They've hit 3 other colonies in the sector, all lightly defended. Jack poured coffee for Frank and Diane. They think we're easy targets. Retired old humans in a backwater town. Susan laughed, but there was no humor in it. They clearly haven't done their research on human veterans. Or, they have, Jack said, but they don't understand what they're seeing. Aliens don't retire their warriors like we do. They think retired means no longer capable. The 4 of them fell silent, each lost in thought. Outside, the sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the street. In the distance, strange lights flickered at the old Miller field where the alien ships had landed. Sheriff won't be able to handle this, Frank said finally. Not, with his 3 deputies and their sidearms. No, Jack agreed. But we might need to let them try first. Do this by the book. Diane shook her head. These syndicates move fast. They'll make an example of anyone who stands up to them early. Shock and awe tactics. Then we need to be ready when that happens, Susan said. I'll talk to Alan West and Judy Newman, former Special Forces, both of them. I'll reach out to Kelly Rodriguez, Frank added. That woman can still fly anything with wings. Jack nodded slowly. I've got some equipment stored away. Never thought I'd need it again. We all do, Diane said quietly. Old habits. As his friends discussed preparations, Jack gazed out the window at his peaceful town. He'd come here after the war seeking quiet, a place where the only decisions he had to make were about the daily special and when to order more coffee beans. But Jack Miller had learned long ago that peace was something you sometimes had to fight for. And while the galaxy might fear active human troops with their ships and guns and official backing, they had never faced the true terror. Retired human warriors with nothing to lose and all the time in the world to get creative. Jack's old sergeant had a saying, Marines never retire. We just hibernate until needed. The hibernation, it seemed, was over. 3 days passed. Jack watched from his diner window as more Zathri arrived in town. They moved in groups of 3 or 4, entering businesses, asking questions, taking notes on their strange devices. The locals grew nervous. Some stayed home. Others carried guns openly, which only seemed to amuse the aliens. Jack closed the diner early and walked to Susan's hardware store. The closed sign hung on the door, but he knocked 3 times, paused, then twice more. Susan let him in. The back room had changed. Gone were the boxes of nails and paint samples. Now there were maps of the town pinned to the walls. A radio set hummed in the corner. Frank sat at a table cleaning an old pistol. Diane typed rapidly, on her tablet. They visited Pete Garcia's grocery store today, Susan said without greeting. Told him he needed protection. Wanted 30% of his earnings. What did Pete do? Jack asked. Refused. He's young, thought his time in the A reserves meant he could handle himself. Susan's face darkened. They broke both his arms. He's in the hospital. Jack felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear. He was too old for that. It was the calm before action, familiar from his combat days. Sheriff try to intervene? Frank snorted. Tried. They disabled his cruiser somehow. By the time backup arrived, they were gone. Pete's just the first, Diane said, looking up from her tablet. According to their communications, they're planning to hit every business in town within the week. Show everyone who's in charge. Jack nodded slowly. Then we need to move faster than planned. Where are we with preparations? Susan pointed to a map. Kelly Rodriguez confirmed she has her private plane ready. Greg Winters has been gathering materials from the high school science lab. Alan West and Judy Newman have organized the other. Veterans, about 20 in total. Not many against however many bugs they've brought, Frank noted. We've faced worse odds, Jack reminded him. What about weapons? Susan unlocked a cabinet behind her desk. Inside were hunting rifles, shotguns, and a few pistols. Legal civilian stuff only. We do this by the book as long as we can. And when now we can't? Frank asked. Susan smiled grimly. Then we get creative. The door opened and Kelly Rodriguez stepped in. The former Air Force pilot still moved with the same confidence she had in her flying days, though her black hair now had streaks of silver. They're setting up a perimeter around their ships, she reported. I did a flyover in my Cessna, counted at least 40 Zathri. They've got energy weapons and some kind of armored vehicles. Any sign of what they're planning next? Jack asked. Kelly nodded. They're gathering at the north end of town. Looks like they're preparing for something big tomorrow. They'll want to make another example, Diane said. Someone more prominent than Pete. All eyes turned to Jack. His diner was the most popular gathering place in town. Let them come, Jack said. His voice was quiet, but firm. But we need to be ready, not just for me, for wherever they strike. Greg Winters arrived next, carrying a box of equipment. The former weapons designer now taught physics at the local high school, his brilliant mind finding new purpose educating the next generation. I've been working on something, he said, setting the box on the table. He pulled out what looked like small metal discs. EMP devices, small range, but should disable their communication equipment and maybe even their weapons. Susan nodded, approvingly. Good work. How many? 12. Could make more with better materials. Jack studied the town map. We need to understand their patterns better, their weaknesses. I have something, Diane said. She turned her tablet around to show alien text with a translation. I intercepted more of their communications. These Zathri, they have a physiological vulnerability. Their exoskeletons are sensitive to certain sound frequencies. Can we use that? Frank asked. Maybe. I'm working on it. Diane made more notes on her tablet. Greg looked thoughtful. The school has some powerful audio equipment for assemblies and such. If Diane can isolate the right frequency, Jack nodded. Good. Keep on that. In the meantime, we need eyes everywhere. Susan, can your security cameras cover the main street? Already set up. Feed comes straight to my tablet. They continued planning late into the night. When Jack finally left, the moon was high. The streets were empty except for an occasional Zathri patrol. They watched him with their compound eyes but didn't approach. Not yet. Jack returned to his diner. He unlocked a hidden panel behind the refrigerator and removed a dusty metal box. Inside was his old service pistol, cleaning kit, and a set of combat knives. Beneath these lay his medals and a faded photograph of his Marine unit. He cleaned, the weapons methodically, muscle memory guiding his hands. The familiar routine calmed him. When finished, he tucked a knife into his boot and the pistol under the counter. Morning came with a sense of unease hanging over the town. Jack opened the diner as usual, though only a few regulars came in. Bill Parker sat at the counter looking nervous. Heard what happened to Pete, Bill said quietly. They say he'll need surgery. Those bugs are something else, Jack. Jack poured coffee. Pete will be fine. Town will be fine too. How can you be so calm? These aliens, they've got tech we can't match. Jack smiled slightly. Technology isn't everything. The door chimed. Jack didn't need to look up to know who had entered. The clicking of claws on tile gave them away. He continued wiping the counter as 5 Zathri approached. The leader was larger than the others, with scarred chitin, and eyes that gleamed with cruel intelligence. You are Miller, the food preparer. the leader said, mandibles clicking. Jack Miller. This is my diner. The Zathri looked around. A gathering location. Important to humans. Jack said nothing. Your business now requires protection. You will pay 30% of earnings to the Graknar Syndicate. The alien's tone made clear this wasn't a request. I don't think so, Jack said calmly. He continued wiping the counter. The Zathri's eyes narrowed, multifaceted surfaces reflecting the diner lights. You have heard of the food seller? The one who refused? I heard. And yet you also refuse? The Zathri sounded almost curious. Jack finally looked up, meeting the alien's gaze. This is my place, my town. I protect it, not the other way around. The leader made a sound like grinding stones. Laughter, Jack realized. You? Protect? He gestured at Jack's gray hair, his lined face. You are an elder. Retired. End of service. Jack smiled. It wasn't a friendly expression. Son, I've killed things twice your size with nothing but a combat knife and a bad attitude. The Zathri's mandibles twitched. He made a sharp clicking sound, and the other 4 aliens moved forward, claws extended. Perhaps, the leader said, this establishment requires a new owner. Bill Parker slid off his stool and backed away. The few other customers in the diner did the same, moving toward the door. Jack remained where he was, dish towel still in hand. The 4 Zathri guards spread out, their claws extended with a metallic sound. 2 of them drew small devices from their belts, weapons that Jack didn't recognize but understood well enough. Last chance, elder human, the leader said. Submit to protection arrangement or face consequences. Jack set down his towel carefully. You boys picked the wrong town. The leader made a sharp clicking noise. One of the guards rushed forward, moving faster than something that size should be able to move. Its claw aimed straight for Jack's throat. What happened next left Bill Parker unable to speak properly for days afterward. Jack moved. Not quickly. He was 65 after all, but with perfect precision. He sidestepped the claw, caught the alien's arm, and used its momentum to slam it face first into the counter. The impact cracked the Zathri's exoskeleton with a sound like breaking glass. The second guard fired its weapon. A bolt of energy scorched the wall where Jack had been standing. But Jack was already moving, sliding across the floor beneath the blast. His hand came up with the pistol from under the counter. 2 shots rang out. The guard's leg joint exploded in a spray of green fluid. It collapsed, shrieking. The third guard reached Jack and managed to grab him, lifting him off the ground. Jack brought his head forward in a sharp strike that connected with the alien's compound eye. The Zathri dropped him, claws going to its injured face. Jack's boot knife was suddenly in his hand, then buried in the alien's throat. The 4th guard backed away, raising its weapon. Jack threw his empty coffee pot. It shattered against the guard's face, hot coffee spraying into its eyes. Jack was on it before it could recover, his elbow striking a vulnerable joint. The guard went down hard. 30 seconds had passed. The leader stood very still, mandibles open in what might have been shock. 3 of his guards were on the ground moaning. The 4th wasn't moving at all. Jack picked up his dish towel and wiped a splatter of alien blood from his face. Like I said, wrong town, the Zathri leader hissed. This is not over, human. The Syndicate does not tolerate defiance. Neither do Marines, Jack replied. The leader backed toward the door, not taking his eyes off Jack. Prepare yourself, Elder. When we return, it will not be with 5. After the aliens left, dragging their injured, the diner remained silent. Bill Parker stared at Jack with new eyes. What? Bill started, then had to try again. What was that? Jack began cleaning up. The mess. That was a message delivered. Within an hour, the story had spread through town. Susan arrived at the diner with Frank and Diane close behind. You couldn't wait for the plan? Susan asked, though she didn't sound angry. Jack shrugged. They forced the issue. This changes things, Diane said. They'll retaliate quickly now. Make an example of the whole town. Frank nodded. Shock and awe, like you said. Then we move to Phase 2, Jack decided. No more waiting. Kelly in position? Susan checked her tablet. She's been circling in her plane for the past hour. Reports a lot of movement at their camp. Good. Tell Greg to get those EMP devices ready. Frank, how soon can you have your surprises in place? Frank grinned. Give me 4 hours. Jack nodded. You've got 2. The town changed over the next few hours. Stores closed, civilians stayed indoors. But through Susan's network, veterans moved quietly from building to building, taking positions, setting up equipment. In the back of her hardware store, Susan distributed weapons and radios to grim-faced men and women. Many hadn't held a gun in years, but their hands remembered. Keep communications to a minimum, she instructed. Use the code words we agreed on. Remember, these bugs have better tech, but we know the territory. Greg Winters arrived with his students' backpacks stuffed, full of strange devices. Got the EMPs ready. Also made some flashbangs using school chemicals. Not military grade, but they'll disorient. Diane worked at her tablet. I've identified the frequency that should affect their exoskeletons. Send it to your phone, Jack. The school's sound system has been modified to broadcast it when needed. Jack looked around at his friends. All retired, all gray-haired or balding, all deadly serious. This isn't a sanctioned operation, he reminded them. No backup coming, no medals afterward. Never did care much for medals, Frank said. The others nodded. A call came in from Kelly. Susan put it on speaker. They're mobilizing. Kelly's voice crackled. At least 30 Zathri with weapons, vehicles too, heading for town in about 20 minutes. Understood, Jack replied. Stay high, but keep eyes on them. He turned to the others. Take your positions. Remember the plan. We're not trying to kill them all. Just convince them to leave. And if they don't take the hint? Frank asked. Jack's expression hardened. Then we finish it. The veterans dispersed. Jack returned to his diner. It sat on the main road into town, the most likely approach for the Zathri force. He swept up the broken glass, righted the overturned tables, and put on a fresh pot of coffee. Then he waited. The rumble came first. Heavy vehicles moving up the road. Jack looked out the window to see 3 armored transports, larger than anything the town's sheriff department had. Behind them marched Zathri warriors in formation, weapons ready. At their head was the leader from earlier, now wearing what appeared to be battle armor. They stopped in front of the diner. Jack's radio crackled. Sparrow in position, came Susan's voice. Eagle ready, from Kelly. Badger set, from Frank. Other code names followed. Jack smiled slightly. None of them had forgotten their training. Wait for my signal, he said quietly into the radio. The Zathri leader approached the diner, with 10 guards. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he spoke into a communication device. More guards surrounded the building. Jack poured himself a cup of coffee and waited. The door burst open. The Zathri leader entered, his armor gleaming under the diner lights. Your resistance ends now, the alien announced. This town belongs to the Graknar Syndicate. Jack sipped his coffee. You know, I was retired, peaceful. All I wanted was to run this diner and be left alone. Your wants are irrelevant, the leader replied. Surrender now, and your death will be quick. Jack set down his coffee cup. I fought in the Vrexian War. Killed more aliens than I care to remember. Thought those days were behind me. He sighed. Guess not. He pressed the button on the radio in his pocket. Now, across town, all hell broke loose. A high-pitched whine filled the air. The Zathri leader's communication device sparked and went dead. His guards tapped at their weapons, which suddenly stopped glowing. Greg's EMP devices had worked. Outside, explosions rocked the alien transports. Frank's surprises weren't powerful enough to destroy the vehicles, but they created chaos and smoke. Perfect cover. The Zathri leader hissed in anger. What have you done? Jack didn't answer. He was already moving, sliding across the counter, as the aliens drew backup weapons, simple blades that didn't rely on electronics. A Zathri guard lunged at him. Jack dodged, his movements precise despite his age. He'd been fighting in close quarters since before this alien was hatched. From the sky came the buzz of Kelly's small plane. She flew dangerously low, dropping more of Greg's devices. Flashes of bright light and smoke filled the streets. The Zathri forces scattered, their organized formation breaking apart. Jack grabbed the device Diane had modified and pressed the button. A sound too low for human ears to detect blasted through the diner's speakers. The effect on the Zathri was immediate. They clutched at their exoskeletons, mandibles clicking in pain. 30 years ago, Jack said, approaching the leader who was bent over in agony. I was taught to follow orders, fight in formation, use standard tactics. He kicked the alien's legs out from under him. Now I'm just a retired old man with nothing to lose. Across town, Susan led her team from the hardware store. They moved between buildings, picking off disoriented Zathri with precise shots to limb joints. Painful, but not lethal. These weren't soldiers anymore, but they hadn't forgotten how to fight. Frank's voice came through the radio. Second wave activated. More small explosions went off, herding the aliens into predetermined zones. From the school, Greg Winters triggered the modified sound system. The painful frequency blasted across the town square, driving the Zathri to their knees. Diane coordinated from her position in the library. Her tablet showed the locations of all the veterans' teams. Team 3, aliens moving your way. Team 2, clear to advance. The Zathri leader struggled to stand in the diner. You cannot win. We are many. You are few. Jack shook his head. You still don't get it. We're not trying to win a war. We're just making the cost too high for you to stay. A Zathri guard rushed Jack from behind. Before Jack could turn, the alien froze, then collapsed. Bill Parker stood in the doorway holding a taser that Susan had given him. Thought you might need a hand, Bill said, looking surprised at his own courage. Outside, the battle had turned into a complex game of cat and mouse. The veterans knew every alley, every building, every line of sight in their town. The Zathri found themselves attacked from unexpected angles, herded into traps and unable to mount an effective counterattack. Kelly's voice came through the radio. They're trying to regroup at the north end. Should I make another pass? Negative, Jack replied. Save your fuel. Frank, are the north end surprises ready? Oh yeah, Frank chuckled. Just waiting for them to step in it. The Zathri at the north end of town gathered around their commander, trying to restore order. They didn't notice the thin wires Frank had strung across the street or the barrels of water positioned on rooftops. When they triggered the trap, hundreds of gallons of water mixed with a special adhesive from Susan's hardware store poured down on them. In the cold Montana air, the soaked aliens began to shiver as their exoskeletons struggled to regulate temperature. Back, at the diner, Jack zip-tied the Zathri leader's hands behind his back. The alien's earlier confidence was gone, replaced by confusion. You are not fighting like human military, he said. No formations, no standard weapons, no rules. That's what retired means, Jack explained. We don't answer to anyone anymore. Don't have to follow regulations, just doing what works. The leader's compound eyes reflected the diner lights. The syndicate briefings. They said human warriors become weak when they age. Jack laughed. Whoever wrote those briefings never met a retired Marine. Diane's voice came through the radio. Jack, we've secured 23 Zathri, 4 of their vehicles disabled. The rest are retreating to their ships. Good. Susan, Frank, don't pursue. Let them go. The leader clicked his mandibles. You're letting us leave? Why not kill us all? Because we're not butchers, Jack said. We just want to be left alone. He dragged the leader outside. The street was a mess of disabled alien tech smoke and confused Zathri being guarded by determined-looking senior citizens with guns. Take a good look, Jack told the leader. These are retired human warriors, grandfathers and grandmothers, who just want peace. But push us, and this is what happens. In the distance, the sound of alien engines grew louder as the remaining Zathri ships prepared for takeoff. Jack cut the leader's restraints. Go back to your syndicate. Tell them this. Town is off limits, the alien rubbed his wrists. They will not believe. We'll send more forces. Then we'll be waiting, Susan said. walking up with her rifle still aimed at the leader. "And next time, we won't be so gentle." The leader looked from Susan to Jack, then to the other veterans who had gathered. His mandibles clicked rapidly. "I will tell them," he finally said. "This place, not worth the cost." Kelly's plane buzzed overhead, circling as the last Zathri ship lifted off. The veterans watched without celebration. They had won today, but everyone knew the galaxy was full of threats. As the aliens retreated, the townspeople began to emerge from their homes. They looked at the veterans with new eyes, not as old-timers telling war stories at the bar, but as the protectors they truly were. Jack returned to his diner and started cleaning up for the second time that day. Bill Parker followed him in. "That was... I never knew you could..." Bill struggled to find the words. Jack shrugged. "Most people don't. That's the way we like it." "Will they come back? The aliens?" Jack considered this as he swept up broken glass. Maybe, maybe not. And if they do, Jack smiled slightly, then they'll learn what all our enemies eventually learn. There's a reason human retirement homes are the most feared places in the galaxy. Outside, Susan organized cleanup teams. Frank checked his remaining explosives. Diane monitored alien communications. Greg collected his devices for improvements. Kelly landed her plane at the small airfield. Night fell over the town. The veterans returned to their homes, their shops, their quiet lives. To anyone watching, they might again seem like ordinary senior citizens, but somewhere in deep space, a Zathri ship limped home carrying a warning: beware the quiet human towns where old warriors go to rest. For when roused to action, these retired humans were the most dangerous force in the galaxy. 2 weeks passed. Life in town slowly returned to normal. Jack reopened his diner. Susan went back to selling hardware. Frank fixed engines at his garage. Diane recommended books at the library. Kelly tended her garden. Greg returned to teaching physics. The only signs of the battle were a few scorch marks on buildings and the occasional piece of alien technology that children found and brought to Greg for explanation. Pete Garcia returned from the hospital with both arms in casts. The town held a fundraiser to help with his medical bills and to hire temporary workers for his grocery store. Jack personally delivered meals to Pete's home every evening. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Jack was wiping down the counter when his old flip phone rang. Few people had this number. "Miller," he answered. "Got something you should see," said Diane. "Library. Now." Jack found Diane in her office, surrounded by screens. Her days in naval intelligence had made her cautious about advanced technology in personal spaces. Her home had no computers, but her office was a different matter. "What is it?" Jack asked. Diane pointed to a screen showing a news broadcast. The image quality was poor. Galactic transmissions always were. But Jack could make out a Zathri speaking to a reporter. Behind them floated a massive space station. "That's the leader we sent packing," Diane said. "He's at Galactic Council headquarters." Jack frowned. "Turn it up." The Zathri's translated voice filled the room. Unprecedented resistance. These were not military personnel but civilian elders. They disabled our communications, neutralized our weapons, and defeated trained warriors using primitive tools and unconventional tactics. The reporter, a blue-skinned Arcadian, looked skeptical. "You claim a small group of retired humans defeated a Graknar syndicate force?" "Not defeated. Tactically discouraged." The Zathri's mandibles clicked rapidly. "The cost analysis did not support continued engagement. And now you're petitioning the Council for what exactly?" "A formal declaration. Human settlement zones containing high percentages of retired military personnel must be clearly marked in navigational charts." Jack chuckled. Diane smiled. "There's more," she said, switching to another screen. This one showed a formal document with the Galactic Council seal. "They're creating a new classification for human settlements." Jack leaned closer to read. "High-risk retirement zone. Must be approached with extreme diplomatic caution." Susan arrived with Frank close behind. They had also received calls from Diane. So the bugs went crying to the council, Frank said with a grin. Didn't expect that. It gets better, Diane replied. She pulled up another screen showing alien text. I've been monitoring chatter from various species. Word is spreading about what happened here. What are they saying? Susan asked. They're calling it the Montana Doctrine. Basically, it states that while active human military follows predictable protocols and rules of engagement, retired human warriors are unpredictable and therefore more dangerous. Jack shook his head. We're just folks trying to live in peace. That's what scares them, Diane said. You don't want territory. You don't want power. You just want to be left alone. Makes you impossible to negotiate with or intimidate. The library door opened. Sheriff Dan Adams entered, looking uncomfortable. Behind him stood two figures that made everyone tense. The first was human, wearing the formal uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. The second was a tall, elegant alien with silvery skin and 4 arms, a Vrexian, from the same species Jack had fought decades ago. Sorry to interrupt, the sheriff said. These folks insisted on meeting with whoever was in charge of the, incident. Jack and Susan exchanged glances. Susan nodded slightly. That would be us, Jack said. I'm Jack Miller. This is Susan Hayes, Frank Delgado, and Diane Powell. The human diplomat stepped forward. Commander Ellis, Earth Diplomatic Corps. This is High Representative Zilvax of the Galactic Council. The Vrexian bowed slightly. I am honored to meet the Montana militia. Frank snorted. Militia? We're just retirees. The Vrexian's silver eyes widened. You are not a designated defense force? No, Susan said. Just residents protecting our town. Commander Ellis looked pained. There's been considerable diplomatic fallout from your action. The Graknar Syndicate has filed formal complaints. The criminal organization has filed complaints? Diane asked with raised eyebrows. That's rich. The situation is complex, Ellis said stiffly. Jack crossed his arms. Not from where we stand. They threatened our town. We showed them the door. The Vrexian studied Jack closely. You fought in the Earth-Vrexian conflict? I did, as did I. The alien's voice carried a note of respect. Different sides of the same battle. Jack nodded. Old enemies recognizing each other. The Vrexian turned to Ellis. I have seen enough. The council will accept my recommendation. Which is? Ellis asked. The Montana Doctrine will be formally recognized. Human retirement settlements will be designated as autonomous defensive zones. No action will be taken against these defenders. Ellis looked relieved. That's surprisingly reasonable. It is practical, the Vrexian replied. We learned during the war that humans are formidable when organized into military units. But as the Zathri discovered, humans who are free from such constraints are far more dangerous. The alien looked at Jack again. Better to acknowledge this reality than pretend otherwise. After the officials left, Jack and his friends stood in silence for a moment. Well, Frank finally said, guess we're famous now. More like infamous, Susan corrected. Either way, Diane added, I doubt we'll have trouble with alien syndicates again. Jack wasn't so sure. The galaxy was vast and filled with threats. But for now, their town was safe. That was enough. He returned to his diner and found it unusually busy. Word of the diplomatic visit had spread. Locals wanted to hear what happened. Jack served coffee and told the story, downplaying his own role. As evening approached, he was surprised to see the Vrexian diplomat enter alone. The alien had to duck to clear the doorway. May I? The Vrexian asked, gesturing to a booth. Jack nodded and brought coffee. We don't have anything suited to Vrexian tastes, I'm afraid. Water is sufficient, the alien studied Jack. You know, during the war we could never understand why Earth rotated its warriors out of service, while they still had years of effectiveness left. We call it retirement, Jack said. Gives people a chance to live their own lives after serving. Strange concept to us, Phyrexian warriors serve until death or disability. The alien's silver eyes reflected the diner lights. But I begin to see the wisdom in your approach. It creates a population of experienced warriors embedded throughout your society, ready to activate when needed. Jack shook his head. That's not why we do it. Perhaps not intentionally, but the effect is the same. The Phyrexian's voice lowered. A species that treats war as merely one phase of life rather than a lifelong purpose is a species to be feared. After the Phyrexian left, Jack locked up the diner and walked home under a sky filled with stars. Somewhere up there, word was spreading about the quiet town in Montana where old warriors had sent alien invaders running. Jack smiled at the thought. He hadn't asked for any of this. He just wanted to run his diner, swap stories with friends, and live out his days in peace. But if trouble came looking again, well, retired didn't mean defenseless. The galaxy was learning that lesson now. Active human troops followed rules, had oversight, showed predictable patterns. But retired human warriors? They fought with the wisdom of age, the freedom of civilians, and absolutely nothing to prove. That was true terror.